made to you so special? Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
Okay guys, Frank Stout, just a guy from Brooklyn. Want to tell you guys what I've been up to lately, and it's been a big project. Back in November, December of 2022, when I first started this channel, I really didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm going to be honest with you. I had no idea. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to start out with. I just didn't know anything about YouTube, other than to watch it. I started out by doing these videos. I didn't even do them on YouTube. I started using Google Drive and stuff like that, sending them out to friends. And I started by doing a series of videos in regards to my favorite genre, my favorite subgenre of horror, which is slasher movies. I did a total of 6 videos, and unfortunately, even the videos that I put out on YouTube, I didn't make them public. I made them private. They weren't of the quality that I thought that they had to be to be out there. And I only shared them with a small group of people to get feedback. My first video on YouTube was the last of that series, and that was my top 10. And that ended up being my top 10 slashers. But I always felt bad because my list was 50. I gave 50 movies worth of content. A lot of that footage was lost. The entire first video was lost. Never got that back. I was able to compile the footage, and unfortunately, it wasn't the raw footage, so I couldn't fix it much. And that's what I've been doing lately. I went back to the lab. I put it all together. I started nibbling and changing things. I took over 3.5 hours of footage. I shaved it down to about 50 minutes. And I juiced it up. I added better images. I added better footage to it. And I was able to make it
better, stronger, faster.
I bet you don't know what that reference is. But anyway, so I'm here to present that to you today. I also have to apologize that it is still old stuff. These are my first videos. I didn't even have a mic. I didn't have the right equipment. I'm going to be very wooden. These are my first videos. I had stage fright back then. I think I did a good job of it. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very excited to present it to you guys. My 2 rules, as I always got to do. Rule number 1, spoilers. Most of these movies are very, very old, but I'll give a mild spoiler warning. Rule number 2 is, as always, this is a favorites list, not a best list. So if you want to converse with me about my list, give me yours. I'd love to see it. Without further ado, on to my video. At number 50 is going to be a movie called Hellfest. It came out in 2018. You follow a young group of people go to this horror theme park, and unbeknownst to them, there's a killer in the park, and they draw that killer's attention. And in the theme park, there's horror everywhere going on. There's horror, people in mass. So this killer can pretty much just follow them around. He can kill somebody right in front of a group of people, a whole crowd, and they just think it's part of the park. You feel like you're going through the park with these people. So it's kind of like you're getting a double experience. You're getting the slasher movie, and you're getting the experience of going through a horror theme park at the same time. Number 49 is going to be Killer Workout. It's kind of a guilty pleasure for me. It's a very low budget slasher, and it's definitely raunchy. You've got a fitness center where somebody's killing people, and yet these people just keep going back to do their fitness like as if nothing is wrong. And then on top of that, the killer kills people a lot of the times with a safety pin. It's a wacky movie. It's fun. Number 48 would be House on Sorority Row. Now this came out in 1982. It's kind of like the granddaddy to I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's about a group of sorority girls who try to pull a prank on their house mother, and things go wrong, and then the next thing you know, people are being killed, and you really have no idea who's doing the killing. Number 47 is Chopping Mall. One of the greatest VHS covers was Chopping Mall. Like a dead hand or a zombie hand holding a shopping bag. And it's a mall slasher. But the strange thing is the cover is very misleading, because the killer is actually a group of security robots that they had just installed for the mall. And what you have is a group of young people who, most of them work in the mall, and they're partying after the mall is closed down. And then these robots, which if you've ever seen the movie Short Circuit, it's definitely similar to that. Might even be a little bit of a ripoff. Also another one with tons of nudity. It's got raunchy. Number 46 is The Rental. It was done by Dave Franco. This is his directorial debut. It's about two couples go to an Airbnb. They go up there to do some things and party. And you've all heard this horror story about people watching you and people recording you. So they figure out that they're being recorded. The majority of the movie doesn't really gear towards the slasher part. It gears more towards the two couples. It's almost soap opera like. The third act turns into more of a slasher type movie, and it just kicks off fast. Number 45 is Friday the 13th Part 2. It's got Jason before he gets the famous hockey mask. The kills are really good in this. The original has the famous Kevin Bacon kill. This one doubles down on that. The famous shish kebab kill. There are two people, having sex. Jason comes from behind and sticks a spear through the two of them, and the girl underneath is kind of trying to get this guy off. Number 44 is the New York Ripper. So number one, even though it's called the New York Ripper, it's an Italian movie, and the Italians are actually famous for slashers. They're pretty popular with horror fans. I personally am not a big fan of them, but I do like the raunchy ones, and this one's like straight, like soft porn. There's even this ridiculous scene where this woman who's married, her husband lets her go out and have these sexcapades, and she goes to some spot in New York where she meets a Spanish guy in a bar, and he takes off his shoe and starts fondling her underneath the table. Anybody who knows me personally knows I absolutely ski feet. I wanted to vomit through this scene. The killer makes like Donald Duck quacking noises before he kills you. It's pretty out there, but really, really fun. Number 43 is Sorority Row, which is the remake, which I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned before, it's kind of like I Know What You Did Last Summer, but I think it's better. Very similar type of situation, although it doesn't involve the house mother as much. It's definitely not raunchy, but it's definitely a lot of frat boy party. But what really makes this stand out is the kills. The killer actually kills with a particular tool. It looks kind of like that tire iron that you use to fix a flat. It's kind of like a modified version of it. But there's a particular kill involving a bottle of alcohol, which I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's awesome. It made my jaw dropped when I saw that kill. Number 42 just came out this past summer. It's called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. It's more of a whodunit kind of thing. You've got this group of Gen Zers who are having a hurricane party. These people were not put together for you to like them. Like anything but. These are like annoying characters, and intentionally so. it's also hilarious when you listen to some of the things these people say and what they argue about. Then people start getting killed after they play an actual game called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And it's like you have to figure out who the killer is, and so do they. The thing that makes this movie so unique and why it's so high up on my list, it's got an ending that I have never seen in my 50 years of watching movies. Number 41, which is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And this one is really unique. This is definitely the most cerebral of all of these slasher movies. I mean, this is some really clever shit. Freddy, or at least something, some sort of entity that exists in stories, and it decided to go after not characters in the Elm Street movies, but the actors who were in these movies. So he goes after Heather Langenkamp and starts attacking her and her little boy. And you've got a lot of returning characters. You got John Saxon coming. Wes Craven himself is there. And even, Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, is playing Robert Englund. The reason why it's so low compared to the other Elm Street movies that I love is because it really is that more of an homage, like a love letter to the fans. It doesn't have too many kills. Kills are more like reenactments of the ones from the first movie. At number 40, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. It's actually not a remake, and it was made by Netflix. It is a legacy sequel, so it continues off after the first movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies are not technically a pure breed slasher because they're more of a family aspect. It's not one person killing you. It's an entire family just terrorizing you, and they're cannibals. One in particular, they kind of converted the movie into a pure slasher. You have this group of city folk who bought some property in Texas, and they're looking to show that property off to investors, and not knowing that the survivor, the Leatherface, resides in this little town. East of a man with a chainsaw go at this group of like millennials, who are like, going at him with cell phones and whatnot. Texas Chainsaw fans, the real hardcore fans, they don't like this movie, and rightfully so. This is a bad Texas Chainsaw movie if you're a fan of the older movies. But if you're a slasher fan like me, it's right up my alley. Number 39, a 2005 slasher called House of Wax. This one is a remake of an old Vincent Price movie. It's a group of young people who get stranded in a small town, and the small town just happens to have a wax museum, and there's a danger there. Yes, this movie has Paris Hilton in it, and it's kind of infamous for that. But Paris Hilton aside, this movie really, it checks all the boxes. It definitely has some kills I've never seen involving wax. So it really surprised me. Number 38, Halloween 6. I'm speaking about the theatrical cut. To be honest, this movie has no it has no right to be this high up in my list. It really doesn't. It's not a great movie. It's not a great Halloween movie. Michael looks weird. His mask looks weird. He looks kind of chubby and puffy, like he's been putting on some water weight. Where this movie shines and why I have it so high, it's got some really great kills. I mean, when he takes out a few people, he really goes all out. And there is a kind of nice Halloween atmosphere to it. Number 37 is High Tension, a French slasher movie. And when I tell you that the French know how to do horror, the French really know how to do horror. When somebody gets killed, the camera does not pan away at the last second. Two girlfriends who decide to go visit one of their families, and they get there late at night, and they get settled in, and the next thing you know, there's a killer invades the home. This one's got a big twist at the end, and The twist may have you scratching your head a little bit. Number 36 is an 80s slasher called The Mutilator. This is like an 80s low budget slasher, and they're so fun because they're just so cheesy and campy. It's a group of young people who go up to a vacation home and, well, there's a killer. But this particular one has some really great kills. One particular has a fishing hook, a huge fishing hook, which I still couldn't believe that I killed. Number 35 is Sleepaway Camp 2. Sleepaway Camp number 1, the original, is one of my all-time favorites. It's way higher in the list. This one's a little different. They decided to take where that one's not necessarily a comedy. This one's a full-blown comedy. It's a horror comedy. It's raunchy. This one's definitely got your boobage is high in this one. It's got some kills that are fantastic. One involving an outhouse, one involving pot smokers, as they would call them back in the day. Moving right along, we have The Prowler, which came out in 1981. The Prowler is pretty much your typical check the box. Everything from a slasher is in The Prowler. You have your masked killer. This particular killer wears like military garb because the backstory has something to do with a guy who goes to war. A fiance decides to leave him while he's away. Honestly, the story is pretty weak. Tom Savini, he's the man when it comes to effects. It's all about the detail. There's a particular kill where he stabs a guy in the top of the head. When the guy gets stabbed, his eyes roll white. Just adds to the effect. Number 33 is one of the newest movies that I've seen. Shame on me because I should have seen this a long time ago. You're Next. It's fantastic. Came out in 2011. It's a home invasion slasher. It's about a family that gets together for a wedding. And next thing you know, they're being invaded by a group of killers who wear animal masks, which really just add to it. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. Number 32 is Curse of Chucky. Now, I am not the biggest Chucky fan. I do love the original Child's Play. I thought that was like a revolutionary 80s horror movie. This one stands out for me. Why? You're putting Chucky in almost like an old haunted house with a family who's mourning, and the final girl is a girl in a wheelchair. So this gives Chucky a little bit of an edge because, you know, one of the things about Chucky is he is a small doll. So, you know, he has to kind of trick you, you know, in order to kill you. But in this case, with a disabled final girl, it definitely levels the playing field a little bit. This one also adds to the lore, but some people don't like what they added. It goes back to the first movie and before. 31, and that is Maniac, and that is the 2012 remake. This is more like your serial killer movie, like your Hannibal Lecter or like your Norman Bates. This remake, what it does differently is the original, it's a dirty, gritty, guerrilla-style movie. It's got the New York vibe, the grime of that time. This one is total opposite. This one is stylized. This one is California. This one is almost European with certain of the sets that they do. Even the way the camera works and the visuals, it really goes in the opposite direction, but it's the same story. This is one of the best horror remakes out there. They use the camera in a certain type of point of view. It's almost like a video game point of view where you're seeing through Elijah Wood's eyes. You're living through him. Everything he sees, you see. You only really see him in certain scenes and in certain reflections. Number 30 is a movie called Intruder. It's a supermarket slasher. And it's also proof that you can do a slasher movie, a successful slasher movie, without having any nudity. It gives you a great whodunit story with a killer inside of a supermarket. Really don't know who's doing the killing. Some of the kills in these, they're so good that they reuse these kills a few times. I saw they did a recent set of movies on Netflix called Fear Street, which was honoring a lot of these old movies, and they actually had a few of those kills in there, specifically one involving a meat slicer. Number 29 is Psycho 3. Now, everybody's heard of Psycho. It's famous, a famous movie, the shower, the eat, and all that, and that's great. Psycho's not really technically a slasher. Psycho is a psychological thriller made by Alfred Hitchcock. It is a horror masterpiece. Its sequels are considered slashers. And Psycho 3 is the most slasherific. Unlike the first Psycho, which was more about you didn't know what was going on. And then Psycho 2, you don't know who the killer is at all. Norman Bates is really technically sane for the majority of that movie. He kind of gets driven into madness in part 2. But in this one, he's full-blown crazy. So you get Anthony Perkins like in a just ridiculously over-the-top performance. Like an end credit scene where he's just sitting in the police car stroking mother's hand, which always creeped me the hell out. Number 28 is Candyman, which came out in 2021. This is a legacy sequel. The kills were just completely done differently, using like reflections. It's very stylized. I would have to say it definitely was one of the more visually stunning horror movies of 2021. It was a little polarizing. You know, I don't like to do like politics and stuff, but some people are calling it woke or whatever. I don't do that. Like if you're coming for that kind of stuff, you're not gonna find it in my channel. I don't know. I don't care if it is or not. I don't pay mind to it. There is a little bit of a messy ending. I thought the ending could have been a little better. Another thing that they did, which was really, really good, was that they expanded on the lore. The Candyman legend was different from generation to generation. So, in the original Candyman, it was all about that guy who was tortured with the bees and everything. This one was a guy who stood outside Cabrini Projects and handed actual candy to kids. He had a slightly different story, but they all were encompassed into the same like mythos. So coming in at number 27 is Halloween Kills. This is the second installment in the trilogy made by David Gordon Green. I really like the kills in this movie. This movie definitely gives you like the most brutal kills of all three movies. However, there is a flip side to that. There's not much story there. There is like a middle part of the movie involving a hospital with some bad scenes there. And this is definitely the Halloween movie out of these three movies that has the worst dialogue. Evil Dies Tonight stuff. I mean, with people repeating Evil Dies Tonight over and over again. Ridiculous. Constant, monologues involving evil and Michael being evil and what that means to the town, etc., etc. Now, there is some good stuff in there. There's some flashback scenes where they recreated 1978 Haddonfield. They actually had a Michael, and he looked pretty damn good. He looked like the original Michael from the original movie. They even had Loomis there. I thought that's where the movie shined a little bit, with the flashback stuff, tying everything all together. That and the kills make this a must-watch. At number 26 is the very famous Freddy vs. Jason. I'm really happy that this movie came out, and I was ecstatic when I saw it in the theaters, because horror fans waited for like 20 years for this. It kept getting talked about and delayed, and there were little teasers in other movies. If all you care about is watching Freddy and Jason fight, then this is going to be good enough for you. Throughout the years, I've seen the warts in this movie. The fact that they chose a Hong Kong director to make this movie who had no idea about either one of the two franchises, about the history, about the lore. That terrible Jason, big lug walking around like Frankenstein. I don't know what that was about. For some reason, they threw in that Jason was afraid of water because he drowned. When meanwhile, if you've seen the first 7 or 8 Friday the 13th movies, he spends more time in the water than David Hasselhoff. So like late 90s, early 2000 kind of CGI thrown in there. The Freddy stuff is really good. Freddy might look, I would say this is almost as good as it's going to get when it comes to Freddy. He looks fantastic in this movie. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to kill too many people in this one. He's kind of more like the man behind the strings. Number 25 is Silent Night, which is a remake, and a damn good one, of Silent Night, Deadly Night. This came out in 2012. Whoever did this really knew what they were doing. They took the old story, they made some changes. The killer's going around killing people on Christmas, and there's a young cop who's trying to figure it out. It definitely has some great kills. My favorite is one involving a huge wood chipper that they use for like Christmas trees, where it is just like mind-blowing for me. And at number 24 is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. The visuals are really great in this. This is what they call the MTV Elm Street movie. This is where they really like went over the top with Freddy Krueger and made him more of like a pop character. You could say that this one is the one that kind of directed the movies into a more comedic route. The earlier entry did have some comedy in it, but it wasn't on this kind of level. And Kristen just being picked, they replaced her with another actor. I mean, it's kind of tough when you go in that route. They should have just, paid her her money or whatever it was. It would have been a way better movie in my opinion. Renny Harlin famously made this movie. He came up with some really great ideas for kind of dream kills. There's a few involving like a cockroach and some really interesting, really weird stuff. They introduced Alice, which is a pretty decent final girl. I thought she was pretty good. This one's solid. This one's solid. It's not on the level of the movies above it, nowhere near. But I really like those visuals. I really like those effects. Number 23 is the movie Maniac, which came out in 1980. Joe Spinell was one of the ones who helped make the movie. If you've seen any of the Rocky movies, the early Rocky movies, he plays the gangster that Rocky worked for when he was like a loan shark. Joe Spinell really shows off his acting chops in this because he plays a serial killer who's like obsessed with women. This was done by Tom Savini, the effects. A particular scene filmed here in Brooklyn was right by the entrance to the Verrazano Bridge. A very famous little strip where cars would stop by to, be by the water and other things. They would park their cars to do, kind of like a point, like you see in like those old movies. There's a couple going there to mess around in their car. Frank Zito, the killer, shows up with a shotgun and shoots the guy, played ironically by Tom Savini. So technically, because Tom Savini's doing the effects, Tom Savini shot himself in the face. He did a mold of his face, full mold, and it came out fantastic. Another thing that makes this movie so infamous is that they shot this movie guerrilla style, meaning that they didn't go through they didn't have a lot of money, so they kind of just ran through New York, filming scenes without permits. When they did that shotgun scene, he used an actual shotgun, and he shot that shotgun, and after they filmed the scene, they had to run, because obviously the police were going to show up. 22 is My Bloody Valentine, also a remake. Now, My Bloody Valentine, the original, is way higher on my list. I consider it almost like a perfect slasher. A lot of the things that they do with slashers, a lot of the mistakes that they do, is they don't have any character development. Sometimes they'll just throw some characters up there because they know they're going to die, and they don't put in the attention. They don't have any type of storyline. And the original does that really well. It has like a love triangle, and it really gets into the characters. And this one does that just as well. This one came out in 3D. It was one of those movies that came out and they kind of marketed it as a 3D movie. But you can see it. You can see it without the 3D. It works just fine without it. It's never going to be as good as the original, but it's damn close. Number 20 is going to be the original Child's Play. Everybody knows who Chucky is. But this one sticks out for me because I saw this when I was very young. I have a lot of nostalgia for this one. I thought it was done really well. A lot of horror fans prefer the later movies because Chucky the doll wasn't fully developed in this one. And they didn't show the doll much because they used a lot of like animatronics and, you know, a lot of different kind of, you know, movie magic tricks. Coming in at number 20 is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, which came out in 1986. This is another example of a slasher movie with zero nudity. So yeah, a Friday the 13th movie with no boobs. Could you believe that? I'm not gonna lie though, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind if this one had some. This one in particular, because the Friday the 13th movies, that's what you go to see with those movies. You've got the antagonist fighting, trying to stop Jason. Unfortunately, he kind of reawoke Jason in a very Frankenstein manner. This introduces. I never like to use the word zombie. The fans call it a zombie Jason, but I never liked that. I never considered Jason to be a zombie. For me personally, I believe that Camp Crystal Lake has a curse, and Jason not being able to die and keeps coming back, he's just unkillable because of the curse. It has nothing to do with zombies. You get some great kills. You get some comedy in there. You get like that self-aware stuff. Number 19 is, guess what? Part 7. Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. They wanted to do Freddy vs. Jason, but it was all tangled up, and Freddy was owned by another studio, and they were trying to make it happen, but it couldn't happen, so they made another movie, and they said, let's do Jason versus somebody else. They said, let's do Jason versus Carrie. So it's not actually the character Carrie, but it's somebody similar to Carrie. You know, Tina using telekinetic powers, and she's like a troubled young teenager. She is a formidable foe. Buchler, the guy who made this movie, he was great for effects, and what he did, this is my opinion and a lot of people's opinion, this is the best looking Jason of the entire franchise. Buchler went out of his way to show every single bit of damage that was done to Jason in the past 6 movies. He reenacted everything. Every little cut on the mask, every scar, the fact that he was stuck at the bottom of everything shows. This is Kane Hodder's first role as Jason, and it's also his best. I think he's the best Jason, but more because of this particular movie. He felt the same way I felt. Jason's not a zombie. You know, he wanted to make sure that through his movements, because a lot of these guys who play Jason, they have a mask on, they're limited, they don't talk. So everything he did, it was with body movement. He made sure to show Jason breathing to let you know he's not a zombie. The MPAA was infamous in ruining this movie for a lot of people because Buchler himself said it. They destroyed his movie. What you're seeing is like half of what he wanted to show you. And what makes it even worse is the footage is lost. They can't even go back and give you a director's cut. Number 18 is Silent Night, Deadly Night, 1984, the original. This one is actually my favorite Christmas horror movie. It shows like an origin story. It shows a little boy who unfortunately his parents get killed by a guy in a Santa Claus suit. Then he gets raised by nuns, and then the nuns are like abusive to him, like to the point where he's just not all there. And then he goes to work in a toy store, and you see every step of this. So the slasher stuff doesn't even come till much later. But it's a build-up. It's like a nice little build. And number 17 is Terrifier 2. That's right, a movie from this year on this list. Now, there were stories that people were walking out of the theater, that they were passing out, that they were vomiting throughout this movie. Is that possible? Maybe. I don't know. But I walked out with none of that. I walked out of there also knowing that I saw something special, something new. If the kills from slashers are like the money shot, then this is like it focusing on the money shot for like 5 damn minutes. In case you don't know what these movies are about, it's about a killer named Art the Clown. He's a mime clown, so he's like all black and white, and he doesn't talk. But everything he does is through his killing people, and he finds it all funny. So he's like, as he's killing people in really grotesque ways, he's like smiling and laughing at people. Like, just it's odd. It's got a lot of questions that need to be answered when the third movie comes out. There's stuff involving magic swords and but I think there's a backstory with the final girl, who is a character by the name of Sienna, who I think she's the best final girl of the year. She's great. She just happened to make a Halloween costume after something her father had drawn, and it's like a Valkyrie warrior outfit with like angel wings. Number 16 is the original Candyman that came out in 1992. Not too many slashers have that kind of gothic, almost romance type of horror. It definitely doesn't go the way you think it's gonna go. And on top of that, the whole premise of if you say his name 5 times in front of a mirror, it's so creepy that I've never done it. I'm not about to do it. So that's how much of an effect the movie has on me. Tony Todd is just, oh my God, he is the man in everything that he does. His voice adds to it, his chops. I mentioned it's centered around the Cabrini Green projects, which were like some really dangerous projects at that time, and there's a lot going on down there, and it's definitely a social movie. It definitely touches on stuff like race and stuff like that. At number 15 is Friday the 13th, the remake. Came out in 2009. If there's a Friday the 13th movie for me to put on, this is usually my go-to. Why? The first like 4 or 5 Friday the 13th movies, the original ones, there's not much going on there. There's not much of a story. Put some teenagers there and here we go. Somebody's killed. Now what this movie does is it condenses the first 4 movies. It condenses them all into one movie, squeezes them all together. It updates it to a 2000 type of crowd, changes a few things, which I told you when it comes to remakes, you just don't want to see the same story over again. It made changes which some fans don't like. I loved it. This one gives Jason more of a hunter. He's kind of like a hunter Jason. He's not just a great white shark like he was in those other movies. He's clever. He's trapping people. There is some bad CGI in some of the kills. The biggest gripe that the fans have, which I don't agree on, is the characters. They're there to party, and a couple of douchebags in there. Trent, there's a guy named Trent. He's a real douchebag. But the way I see it is, those characters are meant to be that way. They're meant to be that way. They're not meant for you to like them. Number 14 is, this might be the wackiest of all of these slashers. It's a movie that came out in 1982, and it's called Pieces. It was made in conjunction with America and Spain. It takes place in like a university, and there's a killer there who's basically killing people, but not just killing them. He's like taking body parts off of them so that he can build like the perfect woman. They do show a little bit of his backstory in the beginning, but listen, this movie is all types of batshit crazy. It is so fun. When I tell you that this movie is raunchy, yeah. There are scenes in this movie where when they show a young woman taking her clothes off, there's actually like 70s porn music playing in the background. There's an impromptu kung fu fight in the middle of the movie that literally has nothing to do with the movie. It lasts for like 10 seconds, but you're like, what the F is going on? And that's what makes it so great. At number 13th is my favorite Friday the 13th movie. which is Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Came out in 1984. And what it does better than all the rest is it has something very simple: character development. Crispin Glover, very famous actor, kind of a weird guy, but that's what made him so famous, was like that kind of odd guy that he was. He just puts everything into his character. I forgot the name of the guy who plays his best friend, but he's from Last American Virgin. Also, the banter that they have together with the work they're working together is great. And then you've got the little Tommy Jarvis character, the little boy, who just adds that child element. Number 12 is Sleepaway Camp, which came out in 1983. Now, I mentioned that Pieces is the most wackiest, craziest movie, but Sleepaway Camp is the most strangest, most bizarre, to the point where I fell in love with it right away. If it's bizarre because they intended it to be bizarre, or if it was just like an accidental genius kind of thing. Bizarre performances, bizarre characters, even the clothing. I mean, you've got like these young kids, young guys with like crop tops. There's a guy like a camp counselor guy who he's like all built, you know, showing off his muscles, but his shorts are so tight that his junk is like in your face. The dialogue is just as crazy. But the biggest thing that this movie is known for is the ending. And it's one of the most famous endings in horror history. My number 11 is the original Halloween, 1978. This is the movie that started it all. Is it the first slasher ever made? No, it's actually technically the second. It came out in 1978, and it just started. It's like a bomb dropped. The floodgates opened. Out of this, just slasher movies were made. Like this, it was a slasher craze during the 80s because of the success of this movie. I go to slasher movies for kills, and the kills in it are very little blood, very little gore, very simple. And it's not really what the movie's about. Like, it's deeper than that. Number 10 is Barbarian, which just came out this year. Just so you understand, last year, if somebody would have told me, you're going to have a movie from 2022 break your top 10, I would have been like, get out of here. No way. Especially since slasher movies really haven't been, you know, popular like that. But guess what? I got two that cracked my top 10. A young woman coming in on a job interview, coming out of town, goes to her Airbnb late at night, only to find out that somebody's there in the Airbnb, and they've also rented out the place for the night. So there's confusion. What does she do? It's late at night. I stop right there. The best thing you can do with this movie is not know anything. Don't watch the trailer. Don't watch anything. Go to the theater or stream it, whatever you want to do. But watch this knowing absolutely nothing. It definitely tapped into some of my fears, because I definitely have a fear of like basements and shit like that. Like when I was a kid, it made me go into a dark basement. Fuck. Like, moving on to number 9 is another 2022 movie, and that is X. So nobody loves a good mashup more than me. X is kind of a mashup of a slasher movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Boogie Nights. It's a group of young people who were in Texas, and they're filming a porno movie in the 70s. This is like a period piece. And they rent out a barn cheap from this old couple. All I can say is it is fantastic. I mean, you will not be disappointed by this either. So coming in at number 8 is my guilty pleasure of the list. And that is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. And my t-shirt says it all. Best movies for me are movies that have some sort of story behind the making of the movie. Just so you understand, I have a history with it. Growing up, it was my least favorite Elm Street movie. I hated this movie. It didn't make any sense. Freddy's not killing people in their dreams, or is he? He's possessing a boy. Is it the boy killing? Is it Freddy killing? The ending made no sense to me. Fast track, all the way to the 2000s, and I look up a documentary on Elm Street. It's called Never Sleep Again. If you haven't seen it, if you're a fan of the Elm Street movies and you haven't seen Never Sleep Again, I highly recommend you check it out. They gave a big backstory to this movie, and what I didn't know was that the main actor who plays Jesse, Mark Patton, he was a gay actor, but he hadn't really told anybody. And then the producer of the movie, he was trying to make the movie with some gay undertones. It ended up being a big thing. And the weird thing is I had no idea any of this was going on. When I saw the movie back then, I just thought it was a crappy Elm Street movie. But once I realized what was going on and all the little scenes, there's got to be like 100 different little things in the scenes of this movie that are actually like have some sort of, it's like in your face when you see it, when you know, and you go. So watching this movie is like an Easter egg hunt. Coming in at number 7 is Halloween 4, which came out in 1988. Pretty much a perfect slasher. What makes it rise above the others is it's got some great character development. It's got some great kills. Michael in this, he takes on the town and systematically works his way towards getting his niece, Laurie Strode's daughter. This one does not have Jamie Lee Curtis in it. This came out 10 years after the first one, so it's kind of like a H1O unofficially. The only negative that I can see out of this movie is Michael's mask. It looks bad. It's like a cheap, dollar store version of the famous Michael Myers mask. But don't let that ruin your experience. It's got one of the best endings of all the Halloween movies. I think it's great. Moving in at number 6 is My Bloody Valentine, which came out in 1981, like a Valentine's Day slasher. They have a slasher for every single holiday. This one has great kills. It's one of the best slashers. It checks the boxes. It has everything that you want in a slasher. It's done perfectly. It's got that character development that I spoke about. It's got like a little love triangle thing going on. Killer uses like a pickaxe and he's wearing like a miner's outfit. What makes this one fun is you can watch it every Valentine's Day. Watch it with your significant other and have some fun with it. You're gonna watch the uncut version if you're gonna watch this one. Number 5 is Halloween 2018. This one is a legacy sequel. It disregards all the sequels. This is basically part 2 in this timeline. It doesn't have Michael focusing on Laurie Strode like a lot of the sequels do. It takes away the sister angle, that they're brother and sister. They're not brother and sister. And he's let loose and he's not going after her. Does he end up meeting up with her at the end? Yeah, because that's what these movies do. It's fast moving. It's got a nice pace to it. It's got one of the best Michaels. And Michael is brutal in this one. I mean, Michael is going after the entire town. He literally just comes back into town and like house by house just starts taking people down. Coming in at number 4, we got Psycho 2. One of the things Psycho 2 does really good is the whodunit. You have no idea who's doing the killing. That's the beautiful thing. What you get is Norman Bates returning after being in a mental hospital from the events of part 1, trying to get acclimated back. And it seems like somebody's killing people. He's seeing Mother. He's being driven into madness. And what you get is a fantastic performance by Anthony Perkins, one of his best. This is not just one of the best sequels. This is one of the best horror sequels ever. Number 3 is the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it came out in 1984. The only flaw I can find in it is there like a little hokey scene at the end. The ending is a little weird, but I like the fact that it's weird. But there is a little hokey little scene involving like a blow up doll that kind of takes you out of it for a second. If you beat, but this is like nitpicking. I think it's the scariest of all the Elm Street movies. Freddy's not quite the jokester that he becomes later. He's actually, you don't see much of Freddy. He's kind of in the shadows. The great final girl in Nancy. And Wes Craven knew what he did something really special. Like he shopped this story around Hollywood, and nobody thought this would be a good story, and he proved them all wrong. Coming in at number 2 is my favorite Halloween movie, and that's Halloween 2, which came out in 1981. I've never really been big on the original. For me, Halloween 2 is my Halloween. It scared the shit out of me. I didn't really know what to expect. I actually saw the second one before I saw the first one. Maybe that has something to do with why I like part 2 over part 1. One thing I'll say is whether it's part 1 or part 2, there's something about the theme music of Halloween, whether it be 1 or 2, that just it still haunts my dreams. That's what they say when we're together, and watch how you play. They don't understand. This one has a little bit more gore than the first one, and it has way better kills. And my favorite is a hot tub kill that I still think hasn't been topped. Yes, it has Jamie Lee Curtis kind of like stuck in a hospital for most of the movie. She's kind of like taken out of the equation a little bit. Yes, she had cut her hair after the first movie and was wearing a wig, and it's obvious. Who cares? It's great. So my number 1 slasher movie of all time is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. It's been my favorite since I first saw it in the theater. My father, who doesn't like horror movies, took me to see it. I still to this day I have no idea why. It's more of a direct sequel to part 1 than part 2 is. Has some of the best character development I've ever seen in a slasher movie. I mean, you love these characters so much, you don't want them to die. You root for them to survive. And that's pretty rare in slashers. The effects in this one took things to a whole other level. The dream sequences in this were fantastic. And they weren't just like random stuff. Freddy goes after these people, and he finds each one of them has like a weakness, and he goes after by putting that weakness in their face. It expands on the lore. These backstories show a little bit more who gave birth to Freddy. And there you have it. These are my 50 top slasher movies of all time. I really do hope to update this in a few years. My rankings are always ever evolving and changing. Movies move up, movies move down, new movies come in, older movies may come out. I'm glad that you guys made it through, and so from the city that never sleeps,
see my face in lights, on my name on marquees found down on Broadway. Even if it ain't all it seems, I got a pocket full of dreams, baby. I'm from New York, concrete jungle where dreams